Hey everybody, Dr. Jared Skowron from Spectrum Awakening. Today, we're going to be talking about a different topic. We haven't talked about this topic before, but I get a lot of questions about it, which is older boys and masturbation. So it's this is a normal part of life, and this is a normal part of what happens with kids as they start puberty around the age of 12. Is they start to explore things as they start to have more feelings in other places down there. So it's definitely something that is present. It's something that we as parents will have to deal with, whether it's a child on the spectrum or whether it's a neurotypical kid. This is something that kids, as they start puberty, they do. And so, what's interesting about our kids on the spectrum is that they tend to do it more than a neurotypical kid because of sensory processing issues. Okay, all of our kids who are sensory seekers, they go about and they run into walls and they like to be squeezed and they like the weighted vests and they like the weighted blankets and they like the rubbing, etc. Kids who are picky eaters, who are always chewing on things in their shirt, they like sensory input. Okay, and guess what? A huge place for sensory input is going to be the privates. It's going to be the groin. It's going to be our reproductive area that has a lot of sensation. Okay, and so kids naturally, once they find that area, they're like, wow, this is great sensory input. I'm going to keep doing this. Okay. And I think what's important to talk about today is a couple things. Number one, make sure you as parents know this is going to happen. Even though my kid is on the spectrum, once puberty hits, this activity is going to happen. And just like with potty training, what we need to do is make sure that it's done in a certain location. All right. So obviously, there's no medical downside to masturbation, but it is a social thing. So what we have to make sure we do is socially train for this to happen in a certain place. So it's just like potty training. Instead of peeing on the floor or pooping on the floor, we're going to do it in this room. See this room that has the toilet? We're going to sit here and do this activity. Same thing with eating, okay? Hey, let's eat. We're going to eat here in the dining room, and this is where we train to do this activity. This is the social training that needs to happen when it comes to masturbation, is that it should happen in a certain place and not in public, okay? Obviously, there are a lot of different views on masturbation depending on how you were raised or your ancestry or your religion. So I'm trying to come across this as a medical thing to look at, as well as a general social thing to look at. And obviously, if you personally have different views on it, whether it's your religion, whether it's your upbringing, etc., that's totally up to you. But I want to present this as what my families come to me with struggles and with questions, and they say, hey, well, this is happening and my kid's doing this. What do I do? Because it's happening in places where I don't want it to happen. So that's kind of where we're going to go with this, and how we can change these type of things. So um, let me go over a few different research studies. And actually, there were very few research studies on this topic, but we have a few. And so I wanted to go over it because I think you are, I think this is something that's happening with a lot of people. And again, because I talk to a lot of families, and this is an issue when it comes to the boys or the girls around this age. This is something that happens. So I think the first thing to do is show this research study. This shows inappropriate sexual behavior in adolescents with autism. And this talks about sexual behaviors that occur in autism include hypermasturbation, public masturbation, inappropriate romantic gestures, inappropriate arousal, and exhibitionism. Now, we determine these things as inappropriate because we have these social rules and social norms that this activity doesn't occur in front of other people. This activity occurs on its own, when you're alone. So, what we want to do first is make sure that we are training the children when they do a certain thing to do it in a certain place, just like potty training. Okay, that does need to come with a neutral emotional stance, because if we give a negative emotional stance, then they're going to learn this negative association with it. And that may make it the forbidden fruit, like, oh, I can do this and mom and dad won't know that I'm doing it. Or when you have more than a neutral emotion to it, it could guide their future feelings toward this for a lifetime. So here's another research study that kind of talks from a behavioral standpoint what you can do. So this is reducing public masturbation in individuals with autism. That talks about response interruption and redirection, or just response interruption. Now, what is that? And it explains it in a bit, but basically, if a child goes and touches themselves in their groin and you know they're doing it for enjoyment and for a sensory input, what can we do? Well, first we can stop that behavior and then encourage it in other places. All right. So what this study showed was that physical and verbal prompts, such as saying in a neutral tone, stop that, and moving hands away from the genitals, that was very effective in decreasing the duration of the public masturbation. So again, what we want to do is make sure that we don't kind of give to our kids that this is wrong or that this is right, or again, can we be neutral about it and say, you know what, we're not going to do this here, and then how do we then go encourage it somewhere else? Say, okay, we can do that there. All right. So that's the first step about it. I would say another thing that I come across a lot is just parental unawareness that this is going to happen. Okay. It happens in my office. I've got 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds on the spectrum who are humping the table or the bed or whatever is in my office, okay? They're rubbing their groin on this stuff because guess what? It feels good, okay? And a lot of the times, the parents are unaware. So the parents will be like, well, what are they doing? They've never done this before. It just kind of started. I'm like, well, guess what they're doing? We got to bring the dads involved because guess what? They're feeling good. They're making themselves feel good, okay? And again, from a medical standpoint, there's no issue with this. It comes down to a social standpoint. And the other social standpoint is, are we developing habits? So for our kids who have this great sensory need and they are masturbating or touching themselves more than socially appropriate, and obviously there is no one term for that, that can then get them into a habit that they're going to be doing this repetitively. So there are things that we can do behaviorally, like just explained in that research study. Let's say stop it, move their hands away, to then kind of intervening on the sensory level of why this is happening. So that's what we're going to get to next. All right. Here's another one. And this research study just kind of talks about the awareness. This is parental awareness of sexual experiences in adolescents, boys with autism. Parents tended to underestimate the lifetime sexual experience of their sons. Parents underestimated and were unaware of their sexual experiences that may influence their communication, and we do need to improve education about sex and sexuality in the families. So we do need to talk about this stuff, and again, if your kids are verbal enough to kind of understand the conversations, you can get into that. If they're not verbal enough, well, we can't kind of go down that road. But at minimum, at least we can do two things. Number one, make sure it's happening in a certain location, like potty training. And how can we change their sensory so that they're desiring it less, or it provides less of a sensory stimulation for them? This is where the research isn't really concrete yet, but I think there are a couple research studies out there that can guide us and help us along the way of things to try. All right. Now, interestingly enough, these three research studies have to do with medications that affect brain chemistry. Okay. Brain chemistry obviously controls our mood, controls are we feeling good, but they're also going to control sensory function. So the first research study has to do with fluoxetine. So this is excessive masturbation successfully treated with fluoxetine in an adolescent with autism. Well, what's fluoxetine? That's a antidepressant, okay, like Prozac and Lexapro and such. Serotonin antidepressants are one of the interventions that we can do to make kids feel happier and change their sensory input feeling so that they will reduce the amount that they are touching themselves. Okay, here's another research study, effective of mirtazapine, which is another serotonin antidepressant in the treatment of inappropriate sexual behaviors in individuals. This research study had a handful of kids in it. Looks like it had 10 kids, 2 females, 8 males. 5 of the subjects showed a very much improvement in excessive masturbation. 3 showed much improvement, and 1 showed moderate improvement. So again, hitting that serotonin part of the brain, making sure the kids are happier and calmer and changing their sensory is going to reduce masturbation. Last research study, again, there weren't many out there, but I tried to find what I could. This is a research study, excessive masturbation, successfully treated with Ritalin, methylphenidate. It's Ritalin in a 6-year-old with autism who also had ADHD. So Ritalin and methylphenidate and Concerta and Vyvanse and all the ADHD stimulants, they don't work on serotonin, they work on dopamine. Okay, and dopamine is another brain chemical that gives you good feelings so that, geez, perhaps you may not need to have that sensory input of good feelings as much. So we can reduce the level of masturbation. I don't claim that we can stop it at all. Okay, I mean, getting a 12-year-old boy to stop touching himself sounds like an impossibility. But what we can do again is two things. Number one, can we in a way as though we were potty training say, oh no, we're not going to do that here, in a very neutral tone, stop that, move their hands away, and then again, I'm not sure exactly how to do this, but you get the idea. Okay, we're going to do this action in our bedroom or wherever that it feels, hey, this stuff feels good, but we do it in a certain place and not others. So that training can be done. Then what we need to do is really increase the levels of certain chemicals in the brain, and that's what these drug studies do. We want to try stuff naturally. So what we can do, and I've got a few things here. If you want to increase serotonin, you can use 5-HTP. We have a chewable 5-HTP, super serotonin support. These tablets will increase your serotonin levels, period. Okay? More serotonin, more happy, more calm, affects your sensory, also helps a lot of kids with their language. So increasing serotonin can help reduce that need. We're reducing the need to do it. If you want to increase dopamine, our attention on the double supplement. This increases dopamine levels, very similar to how ADHD stimulants like methylphenidate or Ritalin will activate that dopamine receptor. We're making more dopamine for those kind of mood changes and sensory changes. I've also had clinical success with choline. I think choline, we're going to start doing a lot more with choline next year in our supplement line. But our superfolinic acid powder, I've had a lot of good clinical success when it comes to excessive masturbation. And the choline in here helps reduce agitation and helps calm you down. So again, that sense of calmness that the kids get after they touch themselves where it feels good, we can provide that kind of calmness and feel good from a natural perspective. Last thing that we found decent clinical success with is our Common Cool powder. This affects more of NMDA receptors. But again, it provides this feeling of calmness so that kids may not feel the need as often. Again, I'm not saying we can stop this. I'm not saying we should stop this. I'm saying we should redirect it for kids to do it where it's socially appropriate. And again, socially appropriate it has many different factors: where you live, upbringing, religion, different countries you live in. I'm not going to make any kind of judgments on that. But if it should happen in a certain place, we can calmly, neutrally redirect and interrupt, as well as changing our brain chemistry. So again, more of that serotonin, more of that dopamine, more of that choline, affecting the NMDA receptor, which is a stimulant receptor in the brain with our Common Cool. These are all different ways that can help. So it's gonna be a long journey for sure, okay? I remember I was at the National Autism Association conference lecturing, and a mom came up to me. She said, hey, look, I'm a single mom, and boy, every night my kid is moaning and he's pleasuring himself, and is this okay? What's going on? I said, oh my gosh, he's doing this once a night. I don't think that's normal. I think normal might be 3 or 4 times a day. So all jokes aside, this is going to happen. It does happen. If you are the parent of a 12-year-old-ish kind of kid and these behaviors are starting, guess what? Puberty's here to stay. You can't stop it. Just because autism is involved does not mean it stops physical hormonal development of puberty. This is here. What we can do is adjust it from a behavioral point of view as well as a brain chemical point of view. So I hope all of that can help if you're dealing with that right now. Or, boy, if your kid's 10 or 11 and isn't doing it yet, gonna happen soon.